I am now going to go ahead and move into our next slide, which reintroduces our speaker. Jennifer Godbey again is with us, who is an assistant professor and outpatient clinician at UK Department of Psychiatry, seeing a variety of patients, adults, adolescents, and their families. She completed her MSW at University of South Carolina and was employed by Clemson University to do research with pregnant and parenting teens. She earned her LCSW, in Kentucky in 2005 and has been practicing since 2002. And she's trained and certified in the functional family therapy model as of 2014 and has moved on to serve as the primary provider for the FFT clinic, offering family therapy, supervision, and consultation in FFT over the last 8 years. She is certified in EMDR and uses this in regular practice with patients, as well as co-facilitates consultation groups for EMDR, having practiced this model for 15 years. Jen has been doing clinical work and teaching for UK psychiatry for the past 10 years. And from 2003 to 2013, Jen was the program director and therapist for the Florence Crittenton Home Residential Treatment Program. Prior to that, she worked for Bluegrass as an in-home therapist. As a clinical social work supervisor in Kentucky, she has supervised social work clinicians, students, and psychiatry residents. She has presented in classes and conferences/workshops on topics related to the functional family therapy model, EMDR, psychotherapy, and clinical supervision to clinicians and providers in multiple settings. Jen has been active in the Kentucky Society Clinical Social Work for 15 years, serving on the board in multiple roles, currently as past president and chair of the governance committee. In her free time, she loves spending time with family and friends, especially kids, paddleboarding, biking and hiking, and being outside. So we do welcome back and thank again Jennifer for being with us for this session.
Thank you, Chris. I so appreciate that. I was so excited to come back. Again, I have no financial relationships to disclose. But yeah, I was really excited to come back today because I saw so many good questions and I had so much fun answering them. And I hope that this can be a dialogue between us this morning/afternoon, and that I've done an okay job answering the questions you had, but feel free to chime in and we can add to that and make this a meaningful discussion. That's my hope for it. So again, that's kind of a repeat. We talked about this last time, right? But just as a quick review, if there's some of you that were not here last week, the reason we're talking about functional family therapy is that if you ask people what's most important to them, family is up here. It's on the top of our list, but it's missed in a lot of the intervention that we do in our training and practice. Also, families are increasingly experiencing incredible strain during this current climate, financial issues, lots of other anxieties and difficulties. And so they need our support oftentimes. Sometimes we see multiple individuals who are seeking help from the same family, and they may be working on issues that are all related to similar problems. We could serve them more efficiently together than we can with separate providers in different places. Family therapy offers an opportunity to address patterns that people get stuck in. So if you've ever heard anybody in your family or any of your clients say, we have the same fight over and over, that's what I mean. And I hear that all the time. For adolescents or young adults who may be reluctant to engage in individual therapy, family work offers an opportunity to share the work between everybody and decrease the blame and negativity. Sometimes the biggest barrier to going to individual therapy is how bad they think they'll feel about themselves having to talk about the hard things or things they might feel guilty or ashamed of. There is compelling evidence through multiple research studies that continue to show that family intervention, specifically FFT, has a significant impact on mental health and behavioral outcomes. And lastly, we all come from families. They all have patterns. So for us as clinicians, increasing that awareness is really important. And I don't mean this just for clinical therapists. I mean, for all of you who are providers, care navigators, peer support specialists, trainees, students, all of our interactions will have an impact on people. And the more we're aware of where we're coming from, the more effectively we'll be able to intervene. So these were the outcomes for the kind of this whole series. Hopefully today's talk will enhance your understanding of these things. Really, this story of my involvement in FFT is how I was so fortunate to happen upon this particular kind of family therapy and practice with families over the last 8 years. I've had supporters and supervisors that helped me keep going even when I was the only one in this clinic. It has truly changed the way I work with people and how I interact with my own family and with family members. I'm so pleased to share the ways it's making a difference in the lives of the families that we serve and the trainees who are learning from them. And I hope that you learn more about this today, and it continues to bring up more questions about what's happening and what you can take with you to your own practice too. So this is when I'll transition to answering the questions that you shared. Unless there's anything else. Are we ready to go? Okay. So, this was a question about Care 4. It is a measure that's available to be shared. So, just a little bit of history about it. Care 4 is a systematic combination of the FFT measurement system that was developed by Tom Sexton in 2011. And this feedback system is a contextualized one, which was also developed by Dr. Bigman at Vanderbilt. And this interactive system helps clinicians and families enter data into a web-based software, and get out some clinical indicators that really help us plan more accurately how to deliver sessions. So the Care 4 system consists of brief psychometrically sound measures, and families complete them, therapists and supervisors. And I'm going to show you some examples and okay, so first, just a little bit more about the measurement system. So this is a comprehensive system. Like I mentioned, there's several tools. The tools get completed, and then the measurement interprets that to case planning measures that the clinician or the therapist can use. The idea is that we do precision-based care through evidence-informed clinical decision-making. So I showed you this graphic last time, this whole kind of process of each session. We intervene, reflect on it, get the feedback, and then make a plan. The specific measurements tools that we're using, so these are the surveys that we do. We do a pre and post-test survey called the FOM, which is Family Outcome Measure. And that includes mental health functioning, family functioning as measured by the COM, and caregiver parental strain, youth behavior, problem severity, general progress, relationship stability, and trauma exposure and symptoms. We added this one because we know that there is a significant correlation between trauma exposure and both substance use and other problems that come up in families. So those are the pre and post measures. These are the session by session measures. So we meet 12 to 16 weeks, and every single time we meet, we give each family member a measure that measures impact, progress, and alliance. And then we can look at those and plan for the next session. So all these measures are fully integrated into this Care 4 platform. There are also tools for intake, case planning, progress notes, session planning, discharge summaries, as well as model fidelity. So as a supervisor, I fill out a therapist adherence measure that tells how specifically this therapist is adhering to the model. And they fill one out on me so that they can say, okay, is the supervisor doing that too? And then a report is done every 6 months to see how we're doing. So of course, when we do any kind of research, we want to make sure that we're actually doing the model we say we're doing, right? And that's kind of, or that's really important. Okay. Any questions about that slide before I show you the example? Is that making sense? Okay. Okay. So I put in somebody named Maxime Test. That's not a real person. Okay. But this can show you that we have a tab. We have a tab. Are you guys still there? It said Zoom quit.
We're still here. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to get rid of that. Keep saying that. Okay. So this is where the documents and apps would be, every session that you've done, and the SISs, which is the session impact forms. And so then you see here that there's a green, an orange, and a green. And this stands for impact is the first one, progress is the second one, and alliance is the third. And green stands for we're good to go. We're doing great. This is just a handy, really quick visual that can tell you how you're doing with the family. Yellow says, oops, pay attention to this. This is a concern. And red, which thankfully Maxime is not in red at this time, but some of my families are when we start. Red means stop, something's really wrong, we got to pay attention. So I'm going to show you here the example of the actual questions that are asked that generate those indicators. So here's the questions.
It does look like we might have lost your screen.
Okay. My computer has been a little finicky today. Thanks for your patience. Okay, are we back? Okay.
Yes, you can see
So
that.
this is what the family member would see. The youth and caregiver fill out the same one. And they ask them questions like, how are things going? How much progress do you feel like you've made? What was helpful? Do you agree on the ways we're trying to help? Do you feel understood? Do you feel blamed, negative about family members? Did you understand something new today? Do you think we're all part of the problems? This is where we're measuring blame and negativity, which is is a key component to moving from engagement motivation to behavior change. This is kind of measuring hopefulness, like, do I think we can find some solutions? Are we doing this? And this is kind of measuring how important they think that it is and that they're participating is. So that's a little glimpse on what it looks like. And then over time, you will see reports on like graphs on how the family's doing over time.
I'm curious if if you were in red, or say, for instance, like, are there additional like tools or things that come up that help you address those issues?
Yeah, so there are risk management tools depending on the issue. So for example, a suicide and safety plan screener, relapse prevention tools, violence and aggression is another risk factor that we have a tool to work on with that. Those are the main ones I use the most. I think there's also a running away one. I think that's the main ones. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So specific exercises that are part of the skills. So now we're switching to this question that's very specific to the second phase of treatment that I talked about last week is behavior change. So really key that we do not move to behavior change and teaching these skills until we've completed that engagement motivation phase. This is what makes FFT different than just going to a class and learning these skills. These skills are universal. Lots of therapists, you guys as peer support specialists, nurses, these skills are pretty common. What makes FFT specific is that the prerequisite of the engagement motivation phase, that we've completed that phase, that families are motivated, that we've decreased blame and negativity, that they have shared goals and agreements about what they're working on before we move to figuring out the skills. So I just want to be really clear about that, because you won't get the outcomes that we get with FFT if you just hand people pieces of paper with these skills written down on it. That's different than the process, right? While the skills can work, what makes this different is that we sit down with families, we go through that engagement motivation, then on a big whiteboard usually, or sometimes on a screen whiteboard, map out the sequence and who does what in the family all along it. And then we talk about plugging in, okay, so right here, when you got defensive with mom, when she asked you where you were last night, that's where we're going to pause and try to do something else. And so you're being really specific and really precise about where you're intervening and when you're asking them to use these skills. So these are the 5 categories of skills that we're using. And I'm going to go through each one of them and talk about the specifics. And then what I did find for you is a behavior change video that I did probably when I was only a year or 2 into this, with a family that so graciously agreed to be videoed. So I'll show you that after. And while I'm saying that now, because I want you to think about these skills. And if you hear me talk about any of them in the video, that would be a win. Okay. So communication skills that we use. Source responsibility is probably familiar to most of you, even if you don't call that, maybe call it that, maybe you call it an iMessage. You're basically saying, I feel upset when this happens, right? It's a shift and a way we can bring down blame and negativity that's different than saying, when you run out the door and won't talk to me about the problem, I feel upset. It's starting with, I feel upset when you've left and we don't get a chance to talk about the problem. Okay. That shift tends to lower the temperature in the room a little bit and helps people hear the real problem. We work really hard on being direct. A lot of the misunderstandings that happen are because people are assuming that they can kind of offer hints about what they really mean without actually saying it. And that's problematic and leads to us guessing or making assumptions. So we try to teach people how to be direct, even though that's hard and feels vulnerable and is difficult. I will never pretend this work is easy. I just say it's worth it. Like, it's so worth it. Brevity, like particularly for parents who like to lecture, because they feel like if I just say it enough times, it will really get through. We actually have research that doesn't work. Even though anecdotally, most of you probably already know that lecturing doesn't work, but we try to coach people and keep it simple, make your point. Be concrete, so using behaviorally specific terms and describing behavior without value judgments. I think about the family that I had who was like, these kids are just lazy, they won't do their chores, they won't do their schoolwork, they're just lazy, blah, blah, blahs. Right? Well, the kid is just sinking. I think this was a 17-year-old in his chair every time his parents said lazy, right? Like, because it's a value judgment and it assumes something about that behavior. Instead, we could describe the behavior. Okay, so you had XYZ homework assignment and it didn't get turned in on time. We're not assuming why or that any ill intent about it, or the chore was incomplete. Okay, that's a problem that they want to work on. Congruence. So this means that our tone of voice and our body language are all conveying the same thing that the content of our words are conveying. And this is sometimes hard because I will have parents who are saying, you know, we love you and we want the best for you, but they're screaming and they're pointing in their face, or they're, their tone is really aggressive and it doesn't add up. And so because we know as human beings that part of how we communicate is nonverbal, we have to make these two things congruent or the message doesn't get through. And that's a key thing of communication. Presenting alternatives. So holding space rather than insisting that they know. A lot of times between family members, they're like, I know my kid, or I know my brother, he's just blah, 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 right? Seeing if we can say, hold on a second, could other explanations exist for how come he keeps using? Could we ask? Could we try to figure that out? Are you sure that this is the only way to know? Because I'm not. Active listening is another communication skill we teach, to fully concentrate about what is being said with all your attention and all your senses. A lot of times when people are talking, they are actually thinking of the next thing they are going to say. That is not listening. That is just prepping, right? So active listening, reflective listening, or reciprocal listening is the next step of that. It's like repeating that back and then asking for clarifying questions. That way we try to weed out any misunderstandings that might be existing between people. And sometimes we know that the other person isn't ready to change their mind or ready to do anything different. And we just want to make an impact statement. We just want to say, Lance, I hear you about how you don't think you can give up weed right now. I just want you to know I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I'm worried about where that's going to go. Not trying to change your mind. I just want you to know it's still on my mind and I'm still thinking about it. And here's why I'm worried about it. I want you to have enough money to go to school and not waste your money on weed, or I want this for you. Just making an impact statement, no interrogation kind of thing. The next set of skills we work on is problem solving skills. You're probably all familiar with these, right? A lot of times families get stuck in the trap of actually trying to brainstorm solutions to different problems, right? So we haven't paused to agree on what the problem is that we're trying to solve. So for example, maybe parents are trying to solve kid going to school. Kid is trying to solve, I'm actually, the school thing is a problem because I'm being bullied or something. So he's trying to solve the bullying problem and they're trying to solve the school problem, and they're not on the same page at all. So trying to identify what is the problem they can all agree to solve. And in that case, it might be, how do we help you get an education and manage social situations? And that might look really different in terms of brainstorming. So identify what the goal or outcome is. How would you know if the problem's solved? What would have to happen to change? Can you agree on some steps on the problem and what it would take to change it? And then brainstorm all the possible solutions. So there's 3 steps in there that we take before we start thinking about what we can do about it. But I find that families often jump to number 4 without doing any of that. And that's kind of where we end up in a lot of arguments. So then we negotiate, we try one, then we reevaluate. Well, in the negotiation, it's important, and this is part of negotiation skills too, but assert what you want, be behaviorally specific, and talk about alternatives. Using, of course, these skills overlap, right? You're using active listening and validation. And then identify all the ways everyone thinks that it's going to go wrong. Try to troubleshoot those because it will, right? In fact, a lot of times families have already tried a lot of things before they come to us. And so it went wrong in lots of different ways. So we can talk about that. And then try it with your whole effort. A lot of times I might have one family member who's like, yeah, I agree, but their body language is telling me they're not really going to try. Right? So I'm going to say, hey, what would it look like if you put forth your whole effort to this? Do we need to tweak it before you're willing to do that? How would we need to tweak it that you could really get behind this solution? Because of course, if they're not really going to try it, it's not really going to work. And then evaluate if it worked, and then go back to 3 and 4 and repeat. I put a note here in FFT, specifically with problem solving. We are going to talk about what is the theme that reunites them. It might be like a young adult wants more independence, but his family members are concerned about safety. So we're going to frame it in the theme of that. And then, like I mentioned before, we're going to talk about how does it fit in this sequence. So when you guys get home and you eat dinner and you turn on the TV, or so-and-so goes off to work, or so-and-so does this, at what point are we going to need these skills? And when are we going to do these solutions exactly? If we don't make that pretty specific and clear, it might not be obvious to them and they might not try. Conflict management skills. These skills are not for every day, I hope. It's really only for the times when things are too heated to use the other skills, right? What we know is that when people are in intense feelings, in emotion mind, if we're thinking about DBT, only kind of seeing red, they can't think logically and use any of the other skills. We have to bring it down first. One of the ways we can do that is sometimes it makes sense, like I'm sure you've heard the saying, you don't have to fight every battle. Some things are better off avoided, like avoid early triggers that aren't a safety matter or aren't important. And noticing what is happening when you try to prevent a possible blow up. Pay attention to your physical sensations, thoughts, feelings, walk away to avoid. This is where you take a time out. It helps, and I usually coach families to agree ahead of time on a timeout plan. We're all going to go to our rooms, or so-and-so is going to go take a walk or go for a drive or do this. And that there's a planned time to revisit the conversation. Sometimes you can't get out of it. You're in the car, trapped, right? And somebody's yelling at you. Oh, focus on the exact issue or problem you're trying to solve. Don't get distracted on all the other things. Stay kind of in your body. And if you're not able to stay respectful, then contain it to this issue and try to understand each other until you get time for a break. During the timeout is then when you can focus on returning to your emotional equilibrium and revisiting your priorities. When you think about your priorities, this question kind of helps you. How much conflict am I willing to risk to move forward with this issue? What's most important to me in the relationship right now is really a key question that can help people reprioritize. Sometimes they're fighting about what TV show to watch, and it's like, I could watch it tomorrow, right? Like, it's more important to preserve this relationship. Or maybe sometimes they are fighting about something that's much more important and feels more relevant. And supervision and monitoring. This is more probably relevant for younger tweens and teens, but some of the skills can be helpful probably for anybody. The foundation of this idea of how we parent in FFT is alliance-based parenting. So that's appropriate for use for adults, not really younger kids. We would take a different approach. The idea of alliance-based parenting is that the kids are involved in some of the decisions and have a say. What we know is they're more likely to follow through if they have a say. If they're in an authoritarian environment where they're just told to do all the time, we tend to get a lot of defiance and resistance. So some of the tools are to discuss current expectations both ways. Some of the common areas that we see are things like curfews, peers, technology, school chores, other kinds of expectations like that. Review health and safety concerns. I've worked with families on where cutting is a concern, or drug use, or suicidality, or other kinds of things like that. We got to talk about it. What are the other concerns, like independence or building knowledge or skills for self-reliance? This is where sometimes families assume their other families members know things about, young adults know how to balance their checkbook. Or I had a family the other day who was so mad at their teenager for calling. She was trying to put weed on a MasterCard. And it wasn't being accepted. And apparently this person was willing to take a debit card. So she's calling her dad at work, who's like, one, I don't want to pay for your weed, but two, why don't you log into your own debit account and see how much money you have? And she's like, I don't have the app. I don't even know how to do it. And so we kind of worked on, one, of course, the substance use issue is an ongoing issue, but two, she wouldn't be calling in a panic if she knew how to access her own debit card account. So we can decrease the conflict by getting some information out there and some knowledge. Also, what do they all already agree on? What's going well? I mean, usually there is some things that are going well and we can build on that. Like I have one family, they love one of the same shows. They come together once a week to watch that all the time. It's their time together. That can be a time that we figure out what's going well, how do they agree on that kind of thing. Make plans and contingency plans. If one or both parents' teens don't follow through, then we have to talk about what. Courtney asked a question, like some examples of those contingency plans, Courtney, could be, so I'm thinking about, a family that we have right now where there's significant drug use with a 16-year-old girl who's recently tried fentanyl, has tried many other opiates, and weed and other things too. Some of the contingency plans we made were the family member locked up all the sharps in the house, all the other thing, even the Benadryl, and said, if you're going to stay home alone, the things will be locked up. When you start to have clean screens, participate in substance use counseling, whatever, you'll have more access to things that show you have more trust and independence. If you don't, you'll have to either go to the hospital or treatment again. And she agreed to that. She was like, well, if I relapse, I would need to go to treatment again. But we talked about it ahead of time. But because we know that there's a high risk for relapse. And we agreed that she would talk to her parents if she was having the urge to use, or the urge to be with specific people that she knew she would want to use with. So identifying what those risk factors are. For some people, it's a certain place that they always go, certain people that they're always with, a certain time of day or time of month, or kind of other situational thing. And that can be something we make a contingency plan around. I've also had parents say, if you do get messed up, in their words, I will come get you. And that's pretty important. What are the most effective strategies families use when adolescent shares an urge to use? It's most effective to be grateful, which just seems like the opposite, but they just did what you want them to do. And so you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me. I really wanted a chance to work with you on this. Let's talk about what you're going to do with this urge and how I can help you work through it. I think what happens so often that gets families off track is that parents respond with fear, motivated by fear, like, oh my God, they're going to use, and now they're going to overdose, and now they're going to die. And they're just scared to death. And so when they respond with fear, sometimes it looks like anger even. And that's a real lack, what's the word I'm trying to say? It makes adolescents not want to tell them, right? That's what I was trying to say, right? Next time they have the urge, if you react angrily or you react with all fear, they're not going to tell you. Yes, a contingency plan can be harm reduction. I was listening to a podcast the other day about a hotline you can call that's called Never Use Alone. And it's actually run by a mom whose daughter is a heroin user and developed this program, or grew this program to help with other users, mainly saying, you know, I just want you to survive until you're ready to change. And the main thing is to keep people alive when the use is that extreme. Yeah. Yeah. And I usually encourage family members to write it down somewhere and agree to check back. Sometimes that's hard. Life gets busy or emotions get in the way, but yeah. Okay, hopefully I answered those questions. Our last skill is negotiation. Of course, we use this some in the other skills, but sometimes it's helpful, excuse me, to think about, do I really know where the other person is coming from, what their position is and why it matters to them? Sometimes that's missed. We try to search for smart trade-offs, like what's something really important to them that you're willing to give or something is important to you. Kind of making an offer. One of my families the other day was telling me how effective it was for this kid who doesn't want to go to school to be able to get to go four-wheeling on the weekend, because his grandma's willing to take him four-wheeling on the weekend if he goes to school every day. That's important to him. And the school thing is less important to him, but more important to her, right? So yeah, agree to try something on a temporary basis and then reevaluate. In that case, he skipped school for a day and then they had to talk about, well, what does that mean for our agreement, right? Okay. This is my time for my case example.
Hi.
Oh, wait. And I'm going to say one more time about, before I show you this. Oh, yeah, wait. So this is one of my first FFT families. I was really new at it. So, you can see me stumble through, but it also shows you that maybe anybody can learn. I don't know. I do want to express so much gratitude to this family for being willing to be videoed. They share about a lot of very vulnerable things. They are a family that's here in Kentucky that was court ordered to come to this treatment. And if you, for some reason, know them, please, I will not share their names, but please do not mention anything that you learned here in your interactions with them, because I have promised confidentiality. And that we would just use this for educational purposes. And that's really my goal. And like I said, I'm completely indebted to them and I learned so much from them. in this process. So I'm going to show you a little clip. I can't show you the whole session because we take the rest of the time. I'm going to show you 2 little clips. I pause it. I'm going to pause it because they kind of get off track, which is what happens in real life. But then I'll go back to when I start using those skills. So, okay. So I'm going to skip to about, yeah, that's me with short hair. It's about here.
Who is it?
Oh, wait. Okay, the part I wanted to show you was about 8. Yeah, I was missing something. Yeah, okay.
No, today in jail, there was guards coming and he said he couldn't like stand up or talk and that, so that's what I said, Bob. I was just laying there, sitting there, like,
Wow.
see what's going on.
Can you guys hear that? No.
Yeah, it's muffled.
Okay. Oh, but you can hear something?
Yes, we could.
Okay. I'll turn the volume up. Okay. So real quick about who's who in this family. On the left, you're seeing mom. I'm the therapist. I'm here in the black sweater and she's wearing black too. And then next is the younger son in the white t-shirt. And then the muffled kid who you can barely hear, but hopefully gets better, is in the seat next to him. And he did not want his face recorded. And then the uncle, her uncle, mom's uncle, who DCBS required to be like a supervisor person, is over here in the corner. He doesn't say much. He doesn't really see his role, but it comes later. But okay, so I'm gonna try again and make sure, hopefully you can hear him.
I can no longer see them either, so we might need to try. Oh, there we go. Yeah, we can
Okay.
see.
Okay. So they're talking about their experience in residential treatment right now. I think in a second they're about to talk about what happened in court. You just got through it all. And now, I mean, to think that you're here and you're clean after all of that. That was like a year ago this time, huh?
Yeah,
That's all.
well, almost
January 14th.
January 14th, on Holly's birthday is when they got arrested. Daddy died on January 12th, and they got arrested on the 14th, and was court on the 15th. And I was so disgusted and walked into court like, I'm like, so tore up anyway. My daddy just died like the day before. All the thing I forgot.
I was tore up.
Yeah, and they walk into court, and if you look at pictures before, and you look at my boys now, it was just been a year ago. They drove them in court, these two, the nastiest little kid, man, like you ever said, they were yours, you know? Like they drove, Chase got this stupid shirt, like, you know, the Christmas story, I'll shoot your eye out. He's got this shirt, and at that point in time, he did not care what he put on his body, because, you know, it was just his.
Shoot, I was wearing that fresh and I was gonna get fresh and cleaned up, the day I got caught up.
Yeah, well, he didn't get fresh and cleaned up, because, you know, he would go for it, it was nasty. But he had this, that.
So it doesn't sound like you.
No, not at all. And they were just dirty and like that stupid shirt, and I hate that shirt. And I seen it somewhere the other day. I absolutely despise that shirt because I seen him walking in the court, and I looked at Chase. You know, Chase is my first son, and I waited so long to have him. Yeah. And the 2 horrible girls. Woo! I had my 2 girls first. Waited so long for a son, and I walk in, and there's this skinny, like spacious, so skinny, and this ugly ass shirt. I just hate it for the shirt.
I was geared.
And they got him shackled, and he's higher than hell. And I'm looking at him thinking, God, that's my son. And then.
Okay, so I just want to try to ad-lib what's being said because I'm getting the messages in the chat. So she's talking about how overwhelmed she is to see them in court looking so disheveled and skinny and not like her kids. And it's pretty overwhelming and sad for her. Her dad had died the day before. She had to go to court for them. Just a little background, she's a recovering user and has been clean for a long time and works the night shifts at McDonald's to try to pay the rent for this trailer they're living in, which is way expensive and hard. And so she's really kind of burning it at both ends, trying to get them back on track at this point. So I'm going to skip ahead a little to where I start talking about skills. So maybe you can hear a little better. Let's see. We can go back to the lines. Okay. Okay. So I know you got a lot going on and a lot to work out. Let's try to talk a little bit about our practice at home before we go. Okay? Okay. Let's do it. No, we still have a few more minutes, but we also have to do our surveys. So, okay. So when you think about practice, just like you did so great of a job this week, but the challenges that might come up is getting overwhelmed or feeling defensive or feeling frustrated or just not wanting to do stuff, right? So let's think about when those challenges come up, how can you guys work together on this? We can go back to the lines. We all want the same thing. Yes, separate till you calm down first. You have the answers. And then when you come back together,
Help me to start on your F and then your F.
That's a really great idea. I like that a lot. Talk about it so that the way you talk about it is important. If you start off by, could you guys hear him? I said, what should you do when you come back together? And he said, well, you shouldn't say you're effing this or you're effing that. And I was like, okay, that's really great. I'm hoping for what we can do instead, but I'll take that's what they used to do, right? And so he's kind of saying, we're not going to do that. I'm like, okay, let's go with that. That's progress. Yeah. I do effing this, that.
So problem solvers group.
Okay.
And so we have a ranking.
Did it work?
Yeah.
You probably couldn't hear the other son, but he just said we can try the problem solving stuff.
I mean, for about 3-4 hours a day,
So much practice. This is so awesome.
Little bread. 12 kids sitting in the Probably get serious. What you done?
Yeah. And that really tickled you.
Always call me out there. Nobody knew what I did.
Okay, so you have plenty of experience, Devin. Good.
Oh my God.
Right. So starting with I instead of you is a really good idea. So you nailed it on the head there, Devin. So being able to say, I'm this, like I'm upset because you didn't go to school, or I'm upset because I don't have any clothes. Okay. The second part of the video is here, where I'm worried because
You have to say, you have to tell the truth, though, you can't tell us.
okay. Okay. Are we back on now? Yeah. Right. So you have that skill too. So we're gonna instead of you, because when you start by accusing somebody, they get defensive, and then very quickly we could be right back in it. Okay. Let's start with I. Cool, Chase? Yeah. Okay. And Doug, you're in on this too.
I needed to get some water. Where can I get some water?
Right around the corner, there's a bathroom.
Well, you're not leaving when I sit down. Just say I am, dude. I gotta get some water. My throat's hurt.
We'll wait for you.
Are these people upset because we're not crazy and fighting this week?
No, I don't think so.
I feel sorry for them, but they thought they was getting a show. We didn't practice all week.
Okay, she's speaking to the fact that it's being videoed, right? So the kids had to take a bathroom break, and this is like how real life sessions go, right? I'm a little better at it now, but I'm really trying to roll with the punches. People are throwing water bottles, taking breaks, but we keep coming back to what are we trying to do here? So I'll show you a few more minutes and then we can answer questions about it.
Devin has killed me with the 12 kids in the circle.
That's really what they did, though.
I know, but he's so funny. Devin's really funny, dude, I swear.
And I always tell them, I'm like, why are you sitting there snitching on each other for? Like there's no snitching in Rainy. It's probably being truthful. But you still snitching, though. You still snitching. I bet you when I see you outside, I'll punch you in the face, snitching.
Stop.
So like, okay, I've worked in residential before and I know how things go. Like there's a process and you kind of laugh about it, but it's really true stitching. Like when you think about making these skills real for your family, like something that actually is going to work instead of you saying F you all the time. Do you think it's really could work? I mean, it's not the same as
What?
Ramian, it's not snitching, but like, could it really work?
What, telling
What
them?
we're talking about.
Oh, I thought you were telling
Like
them.
being truthful or saying I instead of you.
I mean, yeah, stuff works, yeah.
Yeah?
Because you're not pissing somebody off by telling somebody what you did or what they did.
Right. So if you heard him, he said it works because you're not telling somebody what they did, you're telling them what you did. I agree, but I just wanted to check with you because I know sometimes when you're in residential, at least when I was, kids sometimes just kind of laugh about that stuff.
It's
But it's really hard for them to
It's
think
way
they'll
down
really
there.
use it. You know?
What, put my name on there?
Do you want this?
You got the water.
Oh,
That's where you went to your water.
I thought he said it was too far down there or something.
Okay, so we talked about when you come back together, you're gonna start with however, what you're upset about, what you're worried about, what's going on with you, and then about what's going on, okay? I think that's a really good thing for us to practice.
I'm upset because Chase spent my $20 yesterday. I mean, if we're talking about what I'm upset about.
Okay,
You liked that cigarette though this morning, didn't
He
you?
didn't bring my change back. I was upset. Chase has a problem with buying candy.
okay, I'm gonna stop there because they talk a long time about their use of cigarettes. And while that wasn't, because when they first came to me, they were in recovery for heroin and opiates. We didn't focus that much on the cigarettes, like, because mom also wasn't that worried about it. In some families, it would have been important to change that behavior or target that. But again, we're matching to families and where they are and what their values are. Before we go to the other questions, I know it was hard to hear. Any comments or skills that you heard? Any thoughts about what this really looks like? Hopefully that was a little bit of an example of what behavior change might look like. Okay, Zoom is a little iffy on us today. But we keep getting it back, so that's good. All right, but I'm guessing the sharing went away when the Zoom went away. Okay, are we back? Okay, so examples with FFT with adults. So yes, FFT Adults is another short-term intervention program. So the most data has been through this program that's aimed at young adult offenders reintegrating into their communities, helping them learn those life skills as well as the other kinds of interpersonal skills. And we have also used FFT with adults with developmental disorders or substance use disorders who are living at home. So that kind of scenario where parents may have supported a young adult through rehab a couple of times and they've relapsed and they're back at home and they're concerned about more relapse. And so we're working through that. But there's also a model for folks who are in families where it's not parents, but it's a spouse or siblings or sometimes grandparents or other family members who they're living with. It really can be adapted to whoever's in the situation. I went into some detail about this example that somebody asked about, where the clients mentioned they don't want to tell their partner that they had a slip or return to use out of fear. So what I would do if there is any risk of relapse, which usually there always is in substance use, is we're going to acknowledge that in the very beginning, like I'm talking about the first, at most second session. And we're going to talk about how afraid everybody is of that. And, you know, does that partner have a boundary that if they use again, are they leaving? Or what would they do? We're going to talk about it ahead of time. That is the really, thing I want to mention that we would do first is we're going to talk about people's fears. We know that fears sometimes motivate actions. We're going to assess if this is really a risk, and we're going to talk openly about it in the beginning and where it is in the sequence that happens. Then we're going to practice communication skills. So and I'll just say, when a relapse of any sort happens, whether it's with your behavior or your substance use, like maybe you get into a fight, or maybe you use again, or how are we going to talk about that when somebody messes up? And I'm just going to say, somebody's going to mess up sometime in the rest of their lives, hopefully later, not sooner. But how are we going to talk about that so that we can practice and learn that skill when the issues are low stakes? And then we always meet all together. So there's no individual sessions where a person who is struggling with addiction would tell me in private that this is the case. They would say it, and we would talk about it in the family. And then we keep checking in with folks on their progress and use those measures to find out how it's going. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Foster care. FFT has a program for foster care. New York and Delaware are the most established long-running ones. But DCBS here has looked at options for implementing FFT in Kentucky. We have worked in the UK psychiatry clinic with foster and adoptive families as well. We really see, Care 4 has an adaptation to let 4 caregivers in or more. So we would put a foster care parent, a second foster care parent, a biological parent, a grandparent, whoever is there, we put them in and we talk to them and we include them. So yeah, there's definitely an adaptation for that. And I was gonna share a little bit about that. Yeah, so that model is called TCM, and there's some articles here that I put a link in that slide about. There's some rationale here about why TCM can be useful. Here's the key components. We're coordinating also with the social service worker and the school and other systems. The goal is really stabilization for both families. And of course, we have to work collaboratively with all of those people. If somebody gets left out, that's usually where it goes awry. There's some core principles. Some additional things to take into consideration are, of course, the risks and the requirements with managing child welfare expectations, safety monitoring, any legal issues, family court kind of things. Sometimes courts can really throw you, like they can make a decision that is not in line with your treatment. So staying in touch with the people who are decision makers really is helpful. And the 3 phases are the same. The goals are just really more specific to what's going on in foster care, like the family risk patterns. And we're still doing a systemic clinical assessment, evidence-based decision making, and fidelity and assessment. So yeah, that adaptation I think is pretty cool. It hasn't taken off here yet, but I think it might. Yeah. Okay. Couple more questions from this initial group, and then we'll open it up. What happens post-therapy? In the last phase after behavior change, we make plans for relapse prevention. We work on generalizing the skills for other settings, like these communication skills work with peers and teachers and other people too. That's helpful. Extended family members as well. We look at what are the resources they have now, the support systems. And sometimes there is a recommendation for possible treatment for participants. I say participants in particular because a lot of times the identified patient has had extensive treatment. But what we uncover in the course of FFT is that one or more other family members have realized that they are stuck in a pattern that comes from their own past trauma or something else. So more often than not, I end up referring a sibling or a parent to additional treatment, and the identified patient might be less likely to stay in treatment, but have other resources. Sometimes they are still in treatment, but I also offer booster sessions. So if there's a relapse or families just need to come back together and kind of regroup, they can come back in for a booster session with the main goal of motivating them, reviewing skills, and kind of setting them back out. And then surveys and data collection are also part of post-therapy to see how they're doing. What happens if they say no? Well, first, I don't take no for an answer, at least not right away. So for example, I'll have a doctor here who refers a family and they'll say, hey, well, the mom really wants these 2 teenagers to come, but the dad isn't going to be available. And I'll be like, okay, well, tell me more about that. What do you mean not available? Because I'm really going to work hard. I can do hybrid sessions if he's at work. I can move around the schedule to make it work for them. But sometimes family members don't know much about what is family therapy or what they're being asked to do. So first, educating them on what's being offered is really important. What would they expect? What ideas do they have already about therapy? Some people have experienced all different kinds of therapy, had a negative reaction to something else, and say, I'm not going to do this. So I always engage. I also let them know they might not realize just how important their perspective is, and being left out might really be a problem for them down the road. And I don't want that for them. I want everybody to be involved and have a chance to see their part and participate in the solution. And I will tell them, I'm worried if you don't participate, your perspective will be left out. You won't get to be in on what the family members decide to do. And that could really negatively impact your relationship with your family. We know that FFT works best when everyone's involved. So I just keep reminding them of that. Yes, we can possibly proceed without someone, but I will ask every single session for them to reconsider, and I will stress the critical nature of their role, because I really do believe that it's not going to be the best possible outcome if every person doesn't participate. I also tell family members, because one of the risks that happens is if a family member is not present, everybody will talk bad about them the whole time and blame everything on them. And they're not there to say yes or no or whatever. That's not helpful, right? So I will say, you know what, we're going to report back everything that's said in this session to so-and-so because he or she wasn't here today. And tell me what they said. And that kind of helps decrease that. But then throughout the session, I'll also say, if they start kind of blaming that person, what do you think they would say about this? Or even in extreme situations, hey, we can't even go there because they're just not here. And, reminder, please invite them to come back. Siblings are critical. They get it, what it's like to live with these parents. Even if it's like one step parent or this other person, they know about that just in a way that nobody else does. So they can share their experiences and perspectives. I have one favorite session where this kid was using and not listening to his parents at all. And finally, his sister just looked at him straight in the eye and was like, look, I know you don't believe them, that they care about you. I don't know if they do or not, but I freaking do. And I just want you to know, I want you to live through this. And I'm tired of watching this pattern. And she went on to describe the pattern. But that made all the difference to him. He didn't know his sister was even paying attention to what was going on. He assumed that she was just completely doing her own thing and didn't care. And so recognizing that there's an opportunity for people to share their perspective. And then they can be a key support once they realize that this person does care. Minor children are allowed. Adaptations may need to be required depending on the age and development. Generally, 12 and up, always participate. Younger kids, I might assess what the topics we are talking about, how much they already know, how much they can contribute. Do I need to involve them in certain sessions? Toddlers, no. Like, they can't do talk therapy. It's not really possible. So they would do something more like PCIT or something. Referrals. Most insurances do cover family therapy. The code is 90847. Referrals come from many sources to our clinic. DJJ, DCBS, medical, mental health provider, schools. Self-referrals are accepted. There's not really one specific place or any limitations on that. UK Psychiatry does accept Medicaid on a limited basis. It is based on availability, but I would say about half the FFT cases I've worked with are Medicaid. Family therapy is billed on just one person's insurance, so not everyone needs to be covered. While we prefer in-person appointments because it's easy to miss things that happen off screen in telehealth, I did once have a pit bull steal the device, take it outside, and leave it in the snow, which left me very barely overhearing what was still happening in the house, and then they couldn't find it. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong with telehealth. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but if it's the best fit, we'll do it. I just prefer if we could do it in person. The recruitment question kind of threw me a little, because I'm not going out there doing recruitment per se, but I do share information about FFT with providers and our intake folks here at UK Psych. Talk to families about this treatment option if they call and self-refer, that kind of things. Like I said, some cases have been court ordered. Family members are accepted when they commit to coming, and they're willing to participate, meet the criteria. So certification, you have to be a licensed mental health professional of some sort. You can have an LSW, a CSW, you can be in supervision, and you have to be able to have an opportunity to work with families within the structure and support needed for therapy. In general, there are home visiting programs where FFT is delivered in home. There's also programs that deliver it in residential or treatment settings. And ours is an outpatient clinic. Several different options for certification exist. You can work through an agency program with an existing contract. So therapists who are hired on with UK Psychiatry are invited to participate in our FFT training and can become certified. And then also, if you're in private practice, there's some similar requirements. And I'm going to share those requirements with you really quick. They're similar to the ones that if you're working with an agency or program, if you wanted to do it by yourself. So the goal, of course, is to gain the knowledge to practice. You get online and live training. That happens here too. So there's an initial webinar that explains the program. There's an Adaptware training, which is about 40 hours of online e-learning. So you watch videos, PowerPoints, take quizzes, that kind of thing. There's consultation that's required, 90 minutes bi-weekly calls. You have to have 3 to 5 active cases throughout your training. So you have to be practicing it. We know that's how people learn. And you have to finish with 5 families to get certified, all the way through all the phases. That doesn't mean none of your families can ever drop out. It just means that you have to find someone, you have to start working with somebody else. You have to use the Care4 system for all your cases, and you have to complete all the documents in it. You have to do a 6-month review of your work every 6 months, I should say. You have to submit audio and video tapes. There's advanced trainings after you do that initial one and start with your cases. And then certification is renewed every 2 years. So that's a total number of hours. That's the recertification. Questions about that? No? Pretty cool. All right. And these were my thank you slides and resources. So for the last 15 minutes or so, I wanted to open it up for discussion or questions that you've had about what the answers that you heard today. I know you guys are in all different counties and different roles. I'm curious, like last week we talked a little bit about how you might use some of these principles in your roles, even if you don't go on to get totally certified, which I would love if everyone does. Yeah, Angela, what are some of the biggest challenges you experience in family counseling? How do I address those? Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and then Jamie has another good question too. Okay, biggest challenges. Sometimes I think that it is hard for me. Like I'll know it's under their good intention or the hope. But I know that if I get blended, if I get like to become part of their sequence or get to in it or over align with one family member or another and not stay kind of neutral and balanced alliance between all of them, then I'm going to be in trouble, right? Because I am in charge of the change process as the therapist. So that means I have to take enough of a step back to notice how am I seeing what's going on between them and not judging or getting stuck in any sort of value-based response about what that is or the content of it. So that, yeah, that can be kind of hard, particularly when if one or more family members is just hard, right? Like you've all met people who are sometimes a little bit bristly or a lot or really aggressive or just a personality style that's like, it's really hard for me to see where you're coming from. Then, yeah, you have to work hard at building an alliance with everybody. Other challenges are sometimes when people don't have enough resources for their basic needs to be met and life is chaos. And so they cancel a lot and I work in a medical clinic that doesn't tolerate that very well, but I recognize that in real life, when you get called into work and you work at Waffle House and you need the shift to pay for rent and it's the same time as your appointment, you're going to go in. Because that's life and you have to pay the bills, right? And I don't work in a clinic that's as flexible as it could be to accommodate the real life situation of people who are maybe living on the edge of poverty or have a lot of medical issues that are going on or just other kinds of chaos or difficulty in their lives. So that can be super challenging. Sometimes we use telehealth to make that work, but even that, when families might not be able to afford internet or, we're not doing therapy at the library. So, what are the accommodations we can try to make and help people with that? It's sometimes a big challenge for me. Jamie said, not all people are open to therapy, family or individual. What's your response? Yeah, so most of the families that are referred to us, someone else has already talked to them about it. Like their doctor has said, maybe this is a good idea, or their teacher or like the court ordered cases, it's kind of like a different challenge because it might be like, I'm just doing this to get my kid back, but I don't care. Right. And so engaging them in a way of why would this be important to you? How could it matter? What is really important to you? And can I work with you on that? So yeah, not all people are open to therapy. Kind of like I said in the refusal slide, sometimes they don't know what it is, or they've had a bad experience at another time. So I first try to get that information. If like some family members have agreed, but some are refusing, I'll try to understand, what do they already know about therapy, or what do they expect to happen? And is that accurate? And clarify any maybe misunderstandings about that. If they have an accurate vision and they're like, no, I just don't want to talk about hard things, I'd like to go right on with avoidance. I'll be like, okay, that's a choice, right? Here's what's likely to happen if some of your family's members participate and you don't. And we talked a little bit about that scenario. Or if as a family you decide not to do this, that's of course a choice, or as an individual. And there are other ways that people change besides therapy. And so I'll talk to them about, some people do other kinds of interventions, and what would those be if they're committed to make the change, but therapy isn't for them. But yeah, I find that I don't usually have that conversation unless there is some reason that they're coming. And so I try to go back to that, and what could we do to help them with the reason that they're being referred in the first place. I hope that answers your question, Jamie. Yeah. Okay. What else? What other questions? Comments? Anything that is surprising or interesting, or that you learned that was new, maybe? I always really like feedback. Or was this all same stuff you knew about families already? I'm always open to feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear what other people say, but this was not a model I had heard, or for intervention, a model that I had heard of before, even working, in therapy. So I found everything, all of it to be interesting, even though there were other like applicable certain skills, like you talked about, that are relevant, understanding how it works within this particular system and dynamic, and seeing examples. I thought it was really helpful, and I hope it was for other people to understand, even for the process, like you said, so there are certain aspects that they can apply, or to consider certain clients that they may be working with. It might be a good candidate for
Yeah. Yeah, so we are taking referrals. We have a bit of a wait list, but I'm also training. I have 2 new therapists I'm training starting next month. So I'm super stoked about that. And yeah, also you can email me. It's, I don't know if it's on there. It's jennifer.godbey@uky.edu. I can put it in the chat. But if you have follow-up questions going forward, or want to know, is a referral appropriate or anything, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, what I would say is that, like, when we're working with people, like particularly when people seem resistant at first or not open, our attitude really matters. Being curious, compassionate, being open-minded, not assuming anything. Those characteristics seem to really help in engaging, and that engaging and motivating isn't something that you can only do in FFT. But when you notice ways to decrease the blame and negativity in general, and help people focus on what it is that they want, yeah, that can make a huge difference regardless of the scenario.